Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Pro Football Talk. I'm your host, Sean Grant. If you're unaware, spoiler alert, the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers are in the Super Bowl, which will be held here in Miami. And it looks to be a formidable challenge for each team. But as we know, you wouldn't be here if you didn't feel the same way that I do about the NFL rigging, manipulating, and controlling matchups. All right? So first things first, if you're not willing and ready to hear what we have to say or what I have to say on this, by all means, cut the podcast off right now. And, I wish you well. But if you're willing to listen, truth of the matter is, the NFL is still rigging matchups. Okay? Now, so aside from a few minor things here and there was really no blatant official fuck-ups, if you would, on Sunday and Championship Sunday. And so what I observed, and you may feel the exact same way, there was so much speculation about a Packers-Chiefs Super Bowl. And so much so to the point that I really and truthfully feel like the NFL, once again, it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And one thing they're not is dummies that will leak out information that would basically incriminate them for what they've been doing as far as rigging and manipulating, the game and allowing it basically not to have any more integrity anymore because the outcomes are manipulated. But what I noticed is that they sort of allowed everyone to kind of catch on to that idea that because it's the 100th season and because the Packers and Chiefs played in the very first Super Bowl, it would be a repeat of that. All the while, they're really tapping into a different storyline, right? So one of those storylines is that the 49ers return to prominence when, back in the day, being a 49er fan, way back when, they were once the best team out there, the team of destiny, they used to call them, because they would just kill everybody. They would just beat everybody. They were kind of like the Patriots of the 1980s and 90s, right? So that's one storyline. Another storyline is the young quarterback matchup with the new faces of the NFL coming alive. Don't be surprised, there's a reason that Jimmy Garoppolo only threw, 8 or 9 passes yesterday, because it sets him up to come back and have a game much like he did in New Orleans when everybody's like doubting, all the 49ers can do is run. All they can do is keep the slow game. They can't really score many points. But what's going to happen, and I promise you, it would be a shock if this game does not turn out into a shootout, sort of kind of how it was with the Falcons and Patriots a few years ago, with basically the Falcons falling apart towards the end. But what I foresee is a bit of a shootout here and a bit of a changing of the guard. If you notice, Breeze got knocked out first round. Brady got knocked out in the first round. The NFL knows that this is a new decade, and it won't be for long before there has to be new faces of the company coming forward. And that's sort of what this Super Bowl is. And so that kind of put a wrench into the idea that Aaron Rodgers would actually beat Jimmy Garoppolo in the 49ers in this past weekend's game, in yesterday's game. And so you kind of knew that the NFL wanted to send a message, because right out of the gate, San Francisco, it's amazing with these teams how week to week, or better yet, not week to week, but more so in the playoffs. They can play so well, and then they just do not show up. If you notice in that game, the Packers looked dejected. I mean, like, they just never were really into it, and they had some urgency, but then it just really didn't translate into anything. And they were just so far behind. It was like 34-7 with like 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And they were so far behind that it was just like, did these guys even bother to show up? Was it just a whole thing like, okay, come play your worst? The 49ers are going to the Super Bowl. That's all you need to know. And because that's how, to me, that's how it felt like they played. I watched them against Seattle last week, and it was so much urgency. It was so much passion. And then all of a sudden, there's nothing. But of course, it's because it's all rigged, right? It's all rigged, you know? So in looking at yesterday and looking at those matchups, once again, the main objective is that the NFL is always a step ahead, right? It'll go as far as it needs to allow you to think that everything is for real when it's actually for rigged, right? Even the Chiefs and Titans game. You know, the Titans show up against the Patriots, and then they showed up against the team that they played last week. The Ravens. Yes, of course, the Ravens. Like, two of the best teams all year long in the NFL. This team shows up, and then all of a sudden, they're kind of not doing the same things that they were doing before against the Chiefs. Like, you got to think. And so, you know, a lot of people argue, well, it's matchup. And I get that. You know, Tyrann Mathieu is an amazing, amazing player. Chiefs have some amazing guys on defense. But overall, you can't tell me they were as good as the Patriots. You can't tell me they were as good as the Ravens. And so for Derrick Henry to run circles around this Raven defense that was so stout throughout the year and then to just kind of disappear against the Chiefs, it just shows you. It shows you that they want a certain Super Bowl. They want a sexy Super Bowl. I mean, for God's sake, it's in Miami, right? Miami is known for its sexy culture and, like, you know, attractiveness, right? Aaron Rodgers is I mean, he came into the league in 2005. What was that, 15 years ago? Like, he's one of those older guys now. You see, yeah, he may have some things going for him as far as the NFL goes, but ultimately, you're seeing a changing of the guard. Now, that's not to say that these guys won't you know, put up some big numbers. That's not to say that these guys won't they won't do well in the years to come, because they will. They take care of themselves, right? But ultimately, if you think about it, I think Mahomes, at one point or another, him and Lamar Jackson were going back and forth for the highest sold jerseys in the NFL, right? And so the NFL pays attention to that stuff, right? They pay attention to that stuff. 49ers get good again. All of a sudden, here's a city that it was absolutely in love with their team when their team was just, I mean, all the talk, all the rage of the globe were representatives of the NFL, right? And the NFL knows that. They know that 49er fans are some of the greatest fans ever, in the sense that they will buy tickets, they will buy hotels, they will buy memorabilia, they will buy merchandise. And so when you think of that, and you also have a young quarterback who you're kind of grooming to be one of the faces of the NFL. I mean, his contract says he is, which, you know, is likely going to be the case. And I just foresee a really big game coming up from Jimmy Garoppolo, and we're going to see a bit of a shootout, right? Especially after last year's Super Bowl. There's no way in hell I would think that they would do another Super Bowl where there was no offense. But ultimately, it gets back to what draws the most interest and what draws the most revenue, right? And so Now what you're going to see over the next couple weeks, even throughout the Pro Bowl, storylines developing. Don't be surprised if some guy comes up and all of a sudden does something absolutely ridiculous to sort of, quote unquote, create some animosity between the squads to make it more interesting. You always got to look for this stuff in during Super Bowl week. Also, don't be surprised if Antonio Brown does something, because he lives here in Miami. Don't be surprised if he does something so crazy to draw attention to what's really going on, at this time. So it's all about creating storylines now, because the Super Bowl is not interesting unless you have, unless there's an urgency to want to get in and to do, and to actually watch these guys play out their frustrations and their emotions and all this other stuff. But it's just interesting. I found that so interesting yesterday about how everything is set up to allow these guys to be in the position that they are right now, right? Like I said, there wasn't much to really call out yesterday, but you got to know, and I mentioned this before, when the NFL knows that especially people like us, like the people watching or listening to this podcast, people who know that it's fake and that it's sports entertainment, that it's rigged, they always have to be a step ahead. And they know when people start talking, because that's when they kind of manipulate what they do. In the WWE, and I love mentioning this because it's so funny how the XFL is now coming out, and I saw a commercial last night during the game. The WWE will create rewrites at the very last minute to manipulate an outcome, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if leading up to the game this week, they thought, okay, everybody, it's too obvious to think that there's going to be a Packers-Chiefs Super Bowl, because then people will know for sure it's rigged. Notice they always keep you on your heels and in speculation, so it's never of, aha, I called it, because so many people, even on the last video, so many people, myself, I even thought about it at first, but then I'm like, no, this is the NFL. You've got to think about this outside of the box, because if you're thinking logically, you'll miss all the stuff they're kind of hidden in plain sight. That's hiding in plain sight, okay? So it was too easy to say a Packers-Chiefs Super Bowl, right? Too easy. But then, you begin to see that, and you see how things play out. You see why Green Bay played so bad. One of the most captivating aspects to me in games like this is watching teams just basically be non-existent emotionally, be non-existent, like physically, maybe except for a couple of guys. But once again, I watched this team. I watched the Titans yesterday. They just looked dejected. And then, the commentators, if you listen to them, they always give you ideas. I remember yesterday in the Niners-Packers game, Troy Aikman threw out the comment that, a lot of times this is about the time, these guys have to play these extra playoff games, and they start running out of gas and running out of energy after a long season. They don't have much in the tank. And then all of a sudden, they follow exactly what he says, and they try to make a little bit of a push, but it's just one of those things that it never, ever transpires to them getting in the game. It's like they just didn't show up as happy as the Titans were and excited to beat Baltimore, to beat New England. They kind of show up to Kansas City. Yeah, they made a late push, but it was just like, okay, we're here just to hand over the Super Bowl. Another thing in that game that I saw a lot of was missed tackles. Here's a team that made a habit of being sure tacklers, hence having a linebacker, former Patriot, Mike Vrabel, as a head coach. The emphasis was always on tackling, and yet still they were missing tackles, blowing coverages. it just, sometimes it's so obvious. Is that saying that goes, the truth is sometimes stranger than fiction? You think and you look and you're like, well, what in the hell happened to these guys? What happened to these guys? Right? So, playoffs are done. Super Bowl is set. Looking forward to the storyline that's going to ensue. Because here, I'll tell you, I don't have any animosity towards the NFL. I don't. I can actually watch it like a wrestling match now and not be emotionally involved thinking that my team is going to win when I know there's already a fixed outcome. I can watch it as someone who observes the athletic ability and the different drama that ensues and takes place. You know, it's actually good to be able to watch it like that. So I don't have any animosity towards them. But I'm curious to know how things are going to play out. I'm curious to know what type of developments. Another thing to look for, a lot of times there's always something out of the ordinary that develops as a story to make the Super Bowl more attractive, right? I think back when, the lineman from the Raiders was going to commit suicide, or he basically left the team. The idea that Bill Callahan from the Raiders changes the entire game plan before the game because him and Gruden were buddies. And that shit was just as shady as you want to make it, What else did we have happening here? Stanford Jennings doing cocaine the night before the game in the hotel. So be on the lookout for certain things, right? Because here's what I feel like what's happening, and then I'll let you guys go. I think the whole idea of the officials messing up and missing blatant calls is kind of run its course, right? I think the NFL kind of sees that, okay, maybe we use this a bit too much. Now I'm saying this here, not knowing what's going to happen in the Super Bowl, but I always feel like they're a step ahead. I always feel like they're ready to do something that is still trying to allow them to catch people off guard. And as long as you're speculating, as long as you're not sure that the matchups are rigged, then they got you, right? And that's what they want you to do. They always want you to speculate. They never want you to have proof, because the only way you can have proof is if you feel something inside of you that says, hold on, there's something not right about this shit. Something is off. And that's all I base it off. Like I said, there's no hate or anything towards them, but I wish they would be upfront and, for the integrity of the game and allow people to know that it's sports entertainment. But hey, I'm just one voice. So all I can do is spread the truth of what is happening, what is going on. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Keep your eyes peeled. Keep your eyes open for any developing storylines. Something tells me Antonio Brown is set to try to make some kind of scene because, like I said, he lives here in Miami, and he's been trying to get as much attention as possible because he hadn't been able to play. So it's like this little kid crying out for attention, but I think it's tied in to the NFL and their story somehow or another. But just keep that in mind and keep on the lookout for that and anything else. Love hearing you guys comment and putting your insight in. That's helping other people who have come to the podcast to kind of see, what's actually going on. And all you're doing is spreading truth. And so I thank you for that, because I'm greatly appreciative that, we have the opportunity to come together and spread truth about what's really going on. So with that being said, guys, have a wonderful week. We will talk soon. Take care. Bye-bye.